Beneath a moon that wept silver tears onto the frozen earth, its luminous sorrow mirroring the fractures in Ilara's soul, she stumbled through the whispering pines, her breath a fragile mist swallowed by the howling gale that clawed at her like vengeful spirits. The rejection had descended upon her swift as a blade's kiss in the dead of night, her pack's alpha, a towering figure of unyielding fur and fangs, snarling accusations that echoed through the gathered shadows. Weakness, a spirit too soft for the wild's merciless law, an omega unfit to bear the pack's burdens. They had driven her out at dusk, the ritual of banishment a brutal symphony of stones hurled like judgments and curses spat like venom, pelting her back as she fled the hearth she had once called home, its warmth now a distant memory seared into her heart. Now, the world unfolded as a vast, indifferent expanse of white, the snow devouring her tracks with insatiable hunger, erasing her existence as if she had never been more than a fleeting dream. Ilara clutched the frozen rose pinned to her ragged cloak, a fragile bloom she had plucked from the pack's sacred garden on the night of her naming ceremony, its petals locked in eternal ice by some ancient enchantment, a symbol of beauty condemned to endure the harshest winters without wilting or dying. It was all she had left of that life, its thorns pricking her palm with sharp insistence, drawing beads of blood that welled up warm and vital before staining the pristine snow in crimson droplets, each one a silent testament to her lingering pain. The wind carried distant weaves from the jagged mountains where her kin still hunted under the same indifferent sky, their calls a mournful chorus that twisted the knife of isolation deeper into her chest. She collapsed against a jagged rock, its surface biting into her side like an accusation, the cold seeping into her bones like the slow creep of regret that had haunted her since the Alpha's decree. What was an Omega without her pack? A shadow adrift in the lunar glow, formless and forgotten, her hidden gift, a faint, intuitive pull toward lost paths and hidden truths, whispered by the goddess in dreams she dared not voice, now mocking her utter isolation, a cruel irony in this frozen wasteland. The rose trembled in her grip, its icy heart pulsing faintly as if alive, mirroring her own, resilient yet fracturing under the relentless weight of abandonment, its beauty a fragile defiance against the encroaching dark. In that moment, as the moon climbed higher, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters, Ilara wondered if survival was merely the art of enduring the unendurable, or if the wilds would claim her as another forgotten soul, lost to the eternal snow. The storm's fury masked the snap of branches until it was too late, the world narrowing to a chaotic blur of white and shadow. A massive form crashed through the underbrush with a thunderous impact, collapsing mere feet from Ilara's makeshift shelter of piled snow and fallen limbs, sending a spray of powder into the air like startled ghosts. She froze in place, her heart pounding like the relentless war drums of ancient battles echoing in her veins, every instinct screaming flight while her body betrayed her with immobility. The Alpha King, Thorn, emerged from the swirling shadows, his immense frame matted with blood that steamed faintly in the frigid air, his eyes glowing with a feral pain that burned through the gloom like embers in ash. Legends had long whispered of him across the northern packs, the once mighty ruler whose iron will had forged alliances from the chaos of warring clans, now haunted by a betrayal so profound it had cost him his throne and scarred his soul with indelible marks of failure. Guilt clung to him like the frost that rhymed his labored breath, a heavy mantle woven from the threads of lives lost to his fateful choices. He had spared enemies in a bid for peace, choosing mercy over the conquest that might have saved his reign, only for war to devour the innocent in retaliation. Now, cursed by a rival's dark rite, a venomous incantation that twisted his visions into nightmares of the dead, He wandered as a lone wolf, his body racked by convulsions that blurred the line between man and beast, duty and despair. Their eyes met under the moon's unblinking, judgmental gaze. A spark ignited, instinctive and raw, like fire meeting dry tinder in the heart of a barren winter, pulling at something primal within her that she could neither name nor deny. Fear coiled tight in Alara's gut, a serpent of survival, warning that alphas like him devoured the weak without remorse, their power a force that reshaped the world in blood and dominance. Yet curiosity stirred beneath the terror. Her omega senses, honed by years of quiet observation in the pack's fringes, detecting the profound wound beneath his guttural snarls, the ethical core buried deep under layers of melancholy duty and self-imposed exile. He growled low, a rumble that vibrated through the ground and into her bones, his massive frame shuddering as he fought to rise, only to slump again, exhaustion claiming what strength remained. She should run, leave him to the mercy of the wolves that bayed in the distance or the storm that promised oblivion. Instinct demanded it. Survival required it. Instead, she edged closer on trembling limbs, the frozen rose in her hand catching the moonlight in a prismatic glow, its ethereal light drawing his pained golden gaze like a beacon in the void. "What hunts you in this forsaken night?" she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the wind's relentless wail, fragile as a thread in the gale. He didn't answer, his breath ragged and labored, but in that charged silence, denial flickered across his features. Neither could afford the vulnerability of connection in this frozen hell, where trust was a luxury as rare as warmth. The air between them thickened with unspoken questions, the rose's thorns drawing fresh blood from her palm, a subtle reminder that even beauty came at a cost. Huddled in the mouth of a cavern carved by ancient glaciers, its walls veined with ice that gleamed like frozen veins under the faint light of a scavenged torch, the wind's rage became their reluctant guardian, barricading the entrance against the encroaching howls of pursuers that echoed like the cries of damned souls. Thorn's wounds wept blood onto the uneven stone floor, the metallic tang sharp and invasive, mingling with the damp chill that permeated every crevice and clung to their skin like a second, unwelcome layer. Alara tore strips from the hem of her already ragged cloak, her hands trembling not from the biting cold that numbed her fingers, but from the overwhelming proximity of his heat, an alpha's fire that radiated through the gloom, thawing the ice that had settled in her veins during her endless flight. Enemies prowled just beyond the storm's veil, rival packs scented with the acrid venom of the usurper's dark magic drawn inexorably by Thorn's cursed trail, their uives a symphony of hunger and hatred that set her teeth on edge. They shared the cavern's meager warmth, her tending his gashes with careful, practiced motions born of pack healings long past, while he watched her with guarded eyes that flickered between suspicion and something softer, more human. The frozen rose, now placed between them on a flat stone like an offering in truce, caught the fire's dancing light, its icy petals casting fractured rainbows on the walls. Empathy bloomed amid the shared pain, tentative at first, like a flower pushing through permafrost. She spoke haltingly of her exile, the pack's scorn for her perceived softness, a gentle heart deemed unfit for the brutal hierarchies of their world, and the raw ache of being cast out like refuse. He listened, then confessed in fragments, his voice a gravelly murmur that resonated off the stones. The lives lost to his merciful choices in a war that had raged like an inferno. The throne he had forsaken not for cowardice, but for a code of honor that branded him weak in the eyes of power-hungry rivals. The guilt that gnawed at him nightly like a predator denied its kill. The bond formed not in the heat of passion, but in the quiet forge of shared fracture. Her rejection, a echo of his shame, both marked by the wild's unforgiving judgment. As the howls outside faded into the night's vast silence, broken only by the crackle of their small fire, Thorn's hand brushed hers in a moment of accidental intimacy, rationalizing it as mere necessity for survival in this hostile embrace. Yet the rose's petals seemed to soften ever so slightly in the fire's gentle glow, hinting at something deeper, more profound, a potential alchemy of souls. What was strength, if not choosing alliance in the face of oblivion, when every instinct screamed solitude? The cavern held its breath, the moon's light filtering through a high crack to silver the scene, as if the goddess herself pondered their fragile pact. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Dawn's pale light filtered through the cavern's narrow cracks like hesitant fingers, illuminating the frozen rose as it thawed in Alara's palm, its petals unfurling slowly, deliberately, like a long-guarded secret finally unveiled under the weight of inevitability. Thorn stirred from his fevered slumber, his massive chest rising and falling with renewed vigor under her tireless care, the alpha's resilience asserting itself against the curse's insidious pull. But the true awakening came not from his mending body, but from the shadows that stirred deep within her own spirit, awakening with a force that stole her breath. As rival scouts, silent phantoms cloaked in white fur, breached the outer wards with stealthy precision, Alara's hidden gift surged to life, the Pathfinder's sight, a sacred dawn bestowed by the goddess in whispers during her solitary moons, revealing hidden trails through the veil of fate and illusion that shrouded the world. Visions flooded her mind in a torrent of silver and crimson, paths winding through blood-soaked snow and walls of encroaching fire, Thorn's curse manifesting as iron chains forged from the hot metal of his own unyielding regrets, links etched with the faces of those he had failed to save. With instinctive clarity, she guided them through a concealed mountain pass, its entrance veiled by illusory mists that parted only at her touch, the rose now blooming faintly red at its core, its essence binding her intuition to his survival like threads in a loom of destiny. He stared at her in the aftermath, as they emerged into a sheltered valley where the wind's bite softened to a murmur, realization dawning across his rugged features like moonlight striking honed steel, sharp and unforgiving. "You are the key," he murmured, his voice thick with a mixture of awe, disbelief, and the raw edge of denial that warred within his duty-bound heart. This Omega, rejected and seemingly frail, cast out like chaff from the pack's granary, held in her quiet grace the very thread capable of unraveling his doom, a power that transcended the brute strength of alphas and the hierarchies of the wild. The connection deepened in that moment, resisted still by the walls he had built around his melancholy soul, walls reinforced by years of ethical isolation and the bitter taste of betrayal, yet undeniable, an undercurrent that pulled at them both like the tide under a full moon. Under the relentless wind that tousled their hair and carried the scent of pine and distant smoke, her gift proved not the weakness her pack had decried, but a spiritual force as potent as any crown, one that could redeem what raw power had shattered irreparably. As they pressed onward, the rose's glow pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, a living emblem of revelations yet to come, whispering that fate was not a chain, but a path chosen in the quiet spaces between fear and hope. The pack's heart pulsed with the raw venom of betrayal as they crested the icy ridge, the rival alpha's banners snapping like cruel accusations in the gale that whipped snow into blinding veils, turning the world into a maelstrom of white fury. Thorn faced his fractured past head-on. The Matilha he had once led with unshakable resolve to the brink of ruin, their loyalty poisoned by whispers of his softness. The traitor, a once trusted beta, whose ambition had festered into treachery, selling secrets for a taste of power, and the rival Alpha, a hulking brute whose eyes burned with the fire of conquest, now claiming Thorn's crown through rivers of slaughter that stained the northern lands. Ilara stood resolute beside him, the frozen rose, now half-thawed, its petals dripping symbolic blood that traced rivulets down her fingers, clutched in her fist like a talisman, its presence a moral compass guiding her through the chaos. The confrontation erupted in visceral, heart-pounding chaos, claws rending fur with wet, tearing sounds that echoed off the peaks, blood spraying across the snow like lunar ink spilled from a shattered vial, uves rising in a cacophony that harmonized with the sickening crack of bone under relentless assault. In the melee's throbbing heart, where the air reeked of sweat, iron, and desperation, choices loomed larger than the mountains themselves. Thorn could reclaim his lost power through the cathartic blaze of vengeance, slaughtering the traitor and rival in a storm of fangs and fury to silence the gnawing guilt that had shadowed him for seasons untold. Or he could yield to the compassion that defined his ethical core, sparing the weak and misguided among the attackers, honoring the code that had first broken him but also elevated his soul above the beasts. Ilara's plea cut through the roar like a blade through silk. Power without heart is just another cage, binding us tighter than any chain the goddess could weave. Her Pathfinder gift illuminated the rival's hidden treachery in flashes of visionary clarity, a web of deceit that ensnared even his own followers, forcing the judgment into sharp relief. As Thorn hesitated amid the fray, his breath heaving and muscles corded with tension, the rose's bloom fully opened in her grasp, its petals scattering like fragile choices into the wind, carried away on gusts that seemed to whisper the goddess's own counsel. Love or freedom, forgiveness or the endless cycle of war. The Alpha's decision hung in the balance, a spiritual precipice under the moon's watchful silvery eye, where every drop of blood shed tested the boundaries of redemption and the cost of mercy in a world forged by fang and claw. Expanding the final 4 chapters, with additional layers of sensory immersion, extended introspections, philosophical dialogues, and heightened cinematic tension, deepens the emotional arc, allowing the themes of redemption and moral choice to resonate more profoundly while staying true to the story's poetic, tragic essence. From the smoldering ashes of judgment rose a fragile yet profound union, the Cavern Temple, its vaulted walls etched with ancient lunar sigils that glowed faintly in the wavering torchlight, as if breathing with the pulse of forgotten deities. Aglow with reflections that danced like captive stars across the frost-kissed stones, casting elongated shadows that seemed to reenact the brutal battles just waged in a silent, spectral ballet. Thorn's monumental choice, mercy over the indiscriminate massacre that might have quelled his rivals and silenced the echoes of his past, had shattered the usurper's iron hold on the fractured packs, splintering alliances like brittle ice under a hammer's blow, but not without a grievous, soul-deep cost. Fresh wounds reopened in the fray's aftermath, spilling warm blood that pooled on the sacred stones in dark, viscous rivulets, the metallic scent mingling with the acrid smoke of dying fires, while guilt's insidious chains tightened around his spirit like overgrown vines laced with thorns, each barb a reminder of the throne he had sacrificed not for glory, but for the trembling lives of the spared. Their wide-eyed gratitude a haunting mirror to his own lingering doubts about the worth of such compassion in a world that rewarded the ruthless. Alara's pathfinder gift, that ethereal dawn from the goddess manifesting as visions in swirling mists of silver and crimson, wove the final intricate thread of their shared destiny with meticulous care, revealing in fragmented prophecies a path not of brutal conquest and dominion, but of profound, alchemical healing, where the raw edges of rejection and shame could transmute into something unbreakable, forged in the quiet fires of mutual understanding rather than the blaze of vengeance. In the fire's warm, flickering embrace, where flames licked at the air with hungry tongues and cast golden highlights on their weary faces, they confronted the core of their entanglement with a vulnerability that bordered on sacred, her bitter exile as the very forge that had tempered his long-sought redemption, stripping away the illusions of alpha invincibility to reveal the man beneath, his deep-seated melancholy, born of ethical dilemmas that had haunted his nights like persistent specters, serving as the unyielding mirror to her own well of despair, reflecting back the hidden strength she had never glimpsed in her reflection during the pack's scornful gaze. The bond between them, long resisted through countless rationalized glances across crackling campfires and shared silences heavy with the weight of unspoken fears and half-formed hopes, crystallized in that hallowed space like frost yielding to dawn. Love emerging not as a fleeting, impulsive desire, but as irrefutable proof of their endurance, born from the slow, deliberate burn of trust, hammered out in the anvil of adversity, now fully accepted in a ritual under the moon's benevolent, watchful gaze, where they exchanged vows, etched not in the crude ink of words alone, but in the profound language of touch, gaze, and the subtle synchronization of breaths that spoke of souls intertwining. The frozen rose, once a brittle emblem of her isolation, now fully thawed and wilting gracefully in her palm with petals that curled inward as if to preserve the fragile essence of their transformation, symbolized their renaissance in vivid, tactile detail. Beauty emerging defiant from the unyielding grip of ice, life blooming insistently from the precipice of near death and oblivion, its faint fragrance, a mix of crisp winter air and subtle underlying sweetness, wafting through the cavern like an incantation. Sacrifice bound them irrevocably in ways both tender and fierce. Her gift channeled the goddess's luminous light through her veins, dissolving the curse's deepest, most insidious roots with pulses of intuitive energy that eased the tormenting visions from his mind, replacing them with glimpses of potential futures unbound by regret, while his unyielding protection, manifest in the steady warmth of his arm around her shoulders and the vigilant scan of his eyes toward the entrance, mended the fractures of her exile, offering a sanctuary where her perceived softness was revered as a rare, luminous strength rather than reviled as fatal weakness. Yet freedom whispered seductively on the chill drafts that seeped through the cavern's cracks. Would they walk separate paths, each carrying the solitary weight of their hard-won rebirth into the unknown wilds, or unite against the eternal, inexorable pull of the northern gales, defying the rigid hierarchies that had sought to define and diminish them both, as dawn broke tentatively over the horizon, painting the endless snow in hues of molten gold and blushing rose that filtered through the temple's high fissures. Thorn drew her close with a gentleness that belied his alpha power, his voice a low, resonant rumble against her ear, carrying the timbre of gravel and hidden rivers. You were born to heal what I could not, in ways no crown of thorns or claw of conquest ever could touch. The temple's air hummed with the resonant residue of their union, thick with the scents of smoldering wood and fresh blood, the moon fading into the encroaching light, but its influence lingering eternal, a silent testament to love's quiet, unassuming triumph over the vast chasm of despair. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Whispers of the northern winds, laden with the crisp bite of pine and the faint metallic tang of distant snowmelt, carried fragmented tales of their defiance across the frozen fringes of the realm, drawing old allies from the shadowed loyalties of forgotten oaths and new shadows born of envy and unresolved grudges to the ever-shifting, treacherous borders of their hard-earned sanctuary. Alara and Thorn moved as one through the labyrinthine winter forests, where ancient pines stood as weathered sentinels cloaked in rime, their branches interlocking like the fingers of protective giants, her pathfinder sight, now a constant, humming awareness in her mind, charting courses unseen by mortal eyes with unerring precision, twisting trails that evaded cunning ambushes laid by opportunistic foes and led to hidden glades where the snow lay untouched and pristine, blanketing the earth in a hush that invited introspection. His alpha presence served as an impenetrable shield against both the encroaching bone-deep chill that clawed at their edges and the myriad threats that slithered in its icy wake, his strides purposeful, yet tempered by the pervasive melancholy that colored his every lingering glance, a quiet storm brewing behind his golden eyes. The thawed rose, carefully pressed into a simple locket of hammered silver at her throat, pulsed with a faint, persistent warmth against her skin like a second heartbeat, a recurring emblem of their intertwined fates that she touched absent-mindedly in moments of creeping doubt, its preserved petals a tactile, almost reverent reminder of fragility transmuted into unyielding fortitude, their faint outline visible through the locket's delicate filigree. Guilt lingered in Thorn's gaze like persistent storm clouds over a deceptively calm sea, the immense weight of the lives he had spared in the judgment's fury mingling inextricably with the tentative, flickering joy of her nearness. Tender moments stolen in the fleeting warmth of crackling campfires where his calloused fingers, rough from years of battle, traced the faint, silvery scars on her arms from the thorns of her exile's trials with a reverence that bordered on worship, and their breaths mingled like rising fog in the crisp, starlit air, carrying mingled scents of pine resin, wood smoke, and the earthy, vital promise of renewal that seemed to emanate from their shared space. Yet dilemmas persisted, weaving through their days and nights like intricate threads in a tapestry of profound uncertainty, pulling at the seams of their nascent peace. Scouts from the fractured packs, remnants of loyalties torn asunder by betrayal and war, sought him out with a mix of desperate pleas for guidance and bold challenges to his authority, testing the merciful code he had reclaimed at such a visceral personal cost, forcing him to weigh the scales of justice against the relentless ghosts of his past failures, each encounter a philosophical crucible that left him staring into the flames long after the intruders had departed. Alara felt the insistent, tidal pull of her own rebirth deep in her core, a spiritual undercurrent that ebbed and flowed with the moon's phases. Should she reclaim her Omega heritage, venturing back to the pack that had scorned and banished her, armed now with the radiant power she wielded like a cloak of light, to demand the recognition denied her, or forge an entirely new path unbound by the choking chains of rejection, free to wander the wilds on her own sovereign terms, guided solely by the goddess's whispers? The moon watched over them each night from its throne in the velvet sky, its silvery light silvering the snow in ethereal, labyrinthine patterns that seemed to map the contours of their inner turmoils with uncanny accuracy, as ethical tempests brewed on the horizon like gathering thunderheads, threatening to unravel the fragile peace they had carved from the jaws of chaos. In the quiet, introspective hours between dusk's velvet descent and dawn's hesitant arrival, philosophy wove through their murmured talks like tendrils of smoke curling from the fire's heart, their voices low and confessional. Faith is the bridge over despair's yawning chasm, Thorn would say, his tone laced with the gravel of experience, built plank by plank from choices we dare not regret, even when the river below rages to sweep them away. Alara would counter softly, her words infused with the intuitive wisdom of her gift. And mercy is the mortar that holds it firm, lest power's weight crumble it to dust. Blood from a fresh, opportunistic skirmish with raiders, shadowy figures who struck from the underbrush like vengeful wraiths, stained the ground nearby in stark crimson splotches against the unrelenting white, its warmth seeping into the snow to form dark hollows. A visceral, grounding reminder that redemption was no idle, ethereal dream, but a vigilant flame demanding constant tending and protection. Its hard-won warmth, a bulwark against the cold, indifferent expanse of the world that stretched beyond their fire's glow. High in the glacial castle's crumbling ruins, perched like a forgotten crown on the spine of the world where torches flickered like dying, defiant stars against walls of translucent ice that wept slow, melancholic tears into the yawning abyss below. The past clawed back with unrelenting primal fury, its talons sharpened by the unrelenting chill of unresolved vendettas and the bitter frost of betrayal's long shadow. The traitor, unvanquished in spirit despite the physical defeats that had left him scarred and limping, rallied the remnants of his poisoned followers, desperate souls twisted by his venomous rhetoric, for a final cataclysmic assault, his dark curse twisting the very air into a choking miasma that carried the foul reek of decay and sorcery, clouding minds and stinging eyes like invisible barbs. Thorn and Alara stood at the precipice of the grand hall, a vast chamber open to the elements where wind howled through fractured arches like the wails of the damned, overlooking chasms that plunged into inky darkness with deceptive allure, the locket rose's fragile petals crumbling to dust under the strain of her intensifying visions, her pathfinder gift surging forth to reveal the enemy's moral rot in horrifying, unrelenting detail, a festering core of deceit and manipulation that had corrupted even the purest hearts among his ranks, turning brother against brother in a web of lies spun from ambition's silk. His duty demanded this confrontation, a reckoning that pulled at the ethical fibers of his being with the force of a riptide, while she anchored him with her unshakable presence, her hand steady and warm in his calloused one as the first guttural howls shattered the tense silence, echoing off the ice like cracks in fate itself. Battle raged with cinematic, heart-stopping ferocity through the hall's frozen expanse. Weaves piercing the night like arrows loosed from shadowed ethereal bows, their mournful tones harmonizing with the savage clash of steel on claw and the wet, resounding thud of bodies slamming against unyielding stone. Blood arcing through the torchlit gloom in graceful, tragic arcs that caught the moonlight and gleamed like liquid rubies before splattering across the frost. The air thickened with the cacophony of snarls, grunts of exertion, and the sharp intakes of breath amid the chaos, the metallic tang of blood overwhelming the crisp scent of ice, while snow flurried in through the breaches, blanketing the combatants in a deceptive veil of white purity. Choices fractured them anew in the searing heat of the fray, testing the bonds they had forged in fire and frost. Thorn tempted by the siren's seductive call of war's promise, a swift, intoxicating absolution through the total annihilation of those who had wronged him so profoundly, his claws extended and muscles coiling with the primal itch for vengeance long denied, a release that whispered of reclaiming the power stripped from him. Alara, in the midst of the whirlwind, felt the equally seductive whisper of freedom's swift wing, the urgent urge to flee the enveloping carnage and embrace the solitude of the wilds over the perilous risks of this deepening unity, her gift flashing warnings of paths diverging into isolation. Yet compassion prevailed like a steadfast lighthouse piercing the storm's heart, her hand firm and guiding in his as she channeled a decisive strike not of mindless, obliterating death, but of piercing revelation, exposing the traitor's labyrinthine web of lies through her visions, which she projected into the minds of his wavering followers, like shafts of lunar light cutting through fog, turning their loyalty against him in a cascading wave of betrayal that echoed and amplified his own crimes. With poetic justice, as the rival fell at last, his hulking form crumpling to the snow-dusted floor with a final gurgling rasp that bubbled with blood, his eyes wide with the shock of his unraveling empire, the rose's essence faded completely from the locket, dissolving into nothingness like mist before the sun, its symbolism reaching a poignant culmination, rejection alchemized into an unbreakable destiny, ephemeral beauty preserved and transcended through the crucible of trial. Yet the cost etched itself deeper into the tapestry of their souls, indelible and raw, a grievous wound on Thorn's flank from a traitor's final, desperate lunge, the gash deep and ragged, bleeding profusely with each labored breath and sapping his formidable strength, forcing Alara to press her hands against it in a desperate bid to staunch the flow, her gift weaving threads of healing light amid the pain, confronting the stark fragility of their love now elevated to the ultimate harrowing. Trial in a world where every hard-fought victory bore within it the insidious seeds of new, unforeseen loss. The castle's winds mourned softly in the aftermath, carrying away the fading echoes of battle on gusts that tasted of salt and iron, leaving only the profound, echoing quiet of two souls bound by deliberate choice under the vast, judgmental vault of the lunar sky. Under a moon crowned in auroral fire that draped the heavens in undulating veils of emerald green and violet mystery, weaving through the star-pricked darkness like the goddess's own tapestry, the northern wilds bore solemn witness to their final forging, where sacrifice bloomed into an enduring, radiant light that promised to outlast the flickering stars themselves and illuminate the shadowed corners of forgotten fates. Alara and Thorn emerged from the castle's looming spectral shadow, weary in body yet unbroken in spirit, their steps synchronized in the crunching snow as if the earth itself conspired to draw them forward, the locket now empty and cool at her throat, its rose dissolved into the ether like a whispered prayer, finally answered and released. A profound symbol returned to the goddess's infinite embrace, marking the completion of their arduous rebirth and the unlocking of cycles that had bound them. In chains of pain and potential, no glittering throne of ice and iron awaited their return to claim, only the open, windswept paths that her Pathfinder gift illuminated with crystalline, almost prophetic clarity, winding sinuously through mist-shrouded valleys of eternal snow and jagged stone spires that pierced the sky like accusatory fingers, while his ethical heart, scarred but steadfast, guided their steps with the quiet, accumulated wisdom of one who had stared unflinching into the yawning abyss of despair and chosen, against all odds, the precarious light of mercy. Love, proven through the unrelenting crucible of trials that had tested them to their cores, of bloodied snowfields turned to battlegrounds, resisted glances heavy with denial, and moral precipices where one false step meant oblivion, emerged not as a glittering, unearned reward dangled by capricious fate, but as the quiet, unyielding strength woven into their very beings, empowering them to face tomorrow's inevitable storms. Her intuitive healing, flowing like lunar rivers through her touch, mending the physical and spiritual scars that riddled his body and soul with patient grace, while his fierce protective vigilance honored the intrinsic worth she had long been denied by her pack's blind hierarchies, transforming the sting of rejection into a reverence that echoed through their every shared breath. In the secluded heart of a lunar temple, nestled in a cleft of the mountains where altars of polished obsidian gleamed with an inner glow from runes carved in the dawn of time, symbols of ancient pacts between wolf and wilderness, they sealed their union with a ceremony born of intuition rather than rote tradition, not with the heavy, oppressive chains of dominance or outdated rituals, but with the deliberate, sovereign choice of equals, hands clasped firmly under the moon's approving, silvery eye, gaze that bathed them in a soft luminescence, vows spoken in the profound language of shared silences, tender touches that conveyed depths words could scarcely touch, and the subtle, harmonious synchronization of their heartbeats resonating like a sacred drum. The wind, once a harbinger of fury, softened to a gentle conspiratorial caress that rustled the temple's hanging icicles like wind chimes, carrying distant eweaves from packs scattered across the wilds that harmonized in an ethereal, approving chorus, as if the very essence of the northern realm acknowledged their transcendence with a collective sigh of release, blood and snow mingling far below in the valley as fertile, life-affirming ground from which new growth could tentatively spring amid the white expanse. Renaissance claimed them fully, enveloping their forms like a warm mantle, from the suffocating depths of exile and isolation to the liberating heights of alliance and mutual reliance, from the oppressive shadows of guilt and self-doubt to the radiant grace of forgiveness and purpose, their intertwined story standing as an indelible testament to the redemptive power woven inextricably into the fabric of fate, where every wound, no matter how deep, held the seed of healing. The wilds stretched endless and inviting before them, a vast, uncharted canvas for moral wanderings, philosophical sojourns under starlit skies, and the quiet exploration of destinies yet unfolding, where every alpha's hidden wound, carved by the blade of duty or betrayal, found its destined omega healer, patient and profound, and every rejected soul, cast adrift on winds of scorn, discovered the luminous destiny concealed within the frost's unyielding embrace. In that eternal flame, kindled not by conquest, but by the deliberate sparks of choice and mercy, they walked onward into the horizon's promise, the moon their constant, luminous companion, casting paths of silver light on trails yet untraveled, whispering that redemption was not an end, but the beginning of an infinite journey. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.